Well, hello.
Hello.
Welcome back to the 220 Gals, the Redemption podcast. Yep. I'm Dr. Amber.
And I'm Jessica.
We have, we've had some stuff go on in our lives this last week. And so we actually had something different planned for this podcast, but we just felt it on our hearts to shift the topic given what's going on. And so we had a friend who passed away, and it was a really interesting circumstance and confusing circumstance. In fact, we still don't know what happened with her. By the time this airs, I imagine we might have more answers. So we just wanted to talk. We're going to talk about grief today, and we're going to share a little bit about her because actually she was supposed to be on this podcast.
Yep.
She had agreed to that. And so this is kind of her episode in that way. And sadly, we are talking about her death and grief around it and how to deal with grief, the unhealthy ways we get trapped in grief, and like how to grieve in a healthy way with God, including God in that process because he is near to the brokenhearted. So yeah, it's kind of it's really sad, but we want to honor her.
Yeah.
In that, So we can get started. Do you want to share a little? You actually met her before I did.
Well, what's even crazier is that, which we'll have to get into, how, like, such a small world. When I first met you guys, she got brought up, and I was like, wait a second, how do you guys even know her?
Yeah.
So Hannah, she competed in bodybuilding the same time that I competed in bodybuilding, and we went to the same national show in Vegas, 2017. And so we're like acquaintances. I feel like the bodybuilding world is once you get immersed in that industry, you all find each other on Instagram. You're all supporting one another because it's a really hard time and it's very isolating, and people don't understand what you're doing unless you're actually also doing it.
Yeah.
So that's how I met her. And then she lived in the same city. And so we went and we worked out, I want to say like 1 or 2 times. Mm-hmm. But she was always so sweet. And then since then, we kind of went on, different journeys. Mm-hmm. But we always stayed acquaintances, and we would, exchange comments or messages here and there. And then I want to say, again, not that long ago when I met all of you, she got brought up in conversation, which I just found so fascinating. I'm like, out of all people and also such a small world, like, how do you guys know her? And I didn't really follow her journey, but through you guys, I started following her, and I saw that she gave her life to the Lord, and she was very vulnerable about it online. And because we have similar testimonies, it was really cool that she shared that online, and it also brought a lot of hope to myself of the time that I was going through of giving my life to God, and just very admirable on how she would share her journey with the Lord, because it wasn't perfect, and she knew that, and she was okay with sharing that. And, I just give so much grace and admiration to a person who can be that vulnerable online, because you're going to receive criticism, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I knew her.
Yeah.
Of her.
I met her through mutual friends, my husband, Chloe, our friends, and I had already met her when she had already given her life to the Lord. And so that's part of why her name's Hannah Moody. That's part of why she was going to be on our podcast, is she was like us in the world. She used to be a dancer at gentlemen's clubs, and she talked very openly online about how that was a big part of her identity. That was a big part of how she got love, how she felt wanted and seen in the world. And by the time I met her, she had given that up for Jesus and started following Jesus. So I kind of met her more in like Christian circles, I'd say. And I just always had a heart for her because I very much related to the struggle of seeking love and validation through your body, through your looks, through sex, through all of that. And I think so many people in our culture can relate to that because that's such a widespread phenomenon for a lot of people. And so her and I would talk a lot just about that journey and about how God was changing her. And it was really, you know, it's just powerful, the struggle that she would put online and how she would talk about it, and that it was really hard, and that it could be messy sometimes, and that it wasn't just like a one and done, like, oh, I never want to go back to that lifestyle again. There's a strong pull when you're in that lifestyle, and that's the way you know to feel good about yourself. There's such a strong pull to want to go back to it, because there's so much. It's called the wilderness, where the Lord takes you through a time where you don't have that, but then you don't also have your full identity in Christ, because you don't understand that about yourself yet. So she was often walking in that in between space and really vocal about it. But this last week, I got a call from our girlfriend. So Hannah lives in Arizona, and I got a call from our girlfriend that Hannah was missing. And my immediate reaction was like, oh, well, her phone probably died. Like, she's fine. And then when I came home and kind of read through online what was happening, like, they were blasting it all over the news in Arizona. She was out hiking in the morning on Wednesday morning, and basically her car was left there. She never made it back to her car, and they couldn't find her. And so friends started alerting the authorities.
Yeah, because she was supposed to go meet someone for lunch.
Yeah.
And she had previously called letting her know, because I think they were supposed to meet at 2 p.m., but she had let her know that it was going to be a little bit after. And then I think I didn't want to say it was by like 7:30. She like still hadn't heard, and that's when they started to alert the authorities.
Yeah. Yeah, and they sent like a search team out that was looking for her that evening in the
drones.
desert. Now, mind you, it was like 104 that day. I mean, Arizona, I used to live in Arizona. It's really hot. It's like ridiculously hot. But she was an avid hiker. And so she even had put on her Instagram story, I packed plenty of water. Like, she knew how to hike. She knew probably how to do moderate to advanced hikes. Even like, she was very fit. She's 31. She was out hiking alone though. And so basically send a search team out. They don't find her that night.
Yeah, they cut off, I want to say 11:30, because it gets so dark there.
Yeah, and then they came back out the next morning and ended up finding her body
By like noon the following day. And it was 600 yards off of the trail.
Right. Yeah. And we don't have any answers to that still.
It's just so weird.
Yeah. There was a lot of theories going on online, but we don't know. We really don't know what happened to her. And there's a lot of people that are very much in shock. I know when I got home and I looked at the information online, I got this dread in I like felt dread. And I was, like, you get a sense of things, and I just felt like she's not okay. And I didn't know what that meant, because I didn't know if that meant she was taken or if she had injured herself. Who knows? And so, we're still at a place where we haven't gotten an autopsy report. We have no idea what actually happened to her. And I'm really hoping they release it so that we can get closure about what actually happened to her.
Yeah, and just to add to that, though, authorities did make a statement saying that they don't suspect any foul play, which authorities, when I was reading through the comments, people were saying like authorities will not say that even if they suspect like a little foul play. So I'm praying that there's absolutely no foul play involved with that, because they said that.
Yeah.
But then, you eliminate that and you're like, what could it be?
Right. Right.
I mean, a lot of people are suggesting heat exhaustion. It could be scorpion, a snake.
Right.
I heard snakes are like really big where the height, because I've never been there, so I don't really know the landscape, but I've heard other people talk about like the wilderness there is pretty
Well, it's crazy because I've gone on plenty of hikes in Arizona. I lived in Arizona for 2.5 years. I saw one scorpion out while I was horseback riding. Not to say that it doesn't exist, obviously. Um, I never saw any snakes. So it's just so interesting, right? But the likelihood of it potentially high. Who knows?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, it's one of those things where, like we said, by the time this comes out, we might have some answers.
And we can always, we can go back and we can add it to this episode if we do find out.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's this, I think, like, death is such an interesting thing because for some of us, when someone close to us dies or someone we love dies, sometimes we have a head up because they're sick or they're older and we can kind of prepare ourselves. And then sometimes life just takes someone, right? And we don't understand why that happened. I know for me, I have a lot of questions around, she was, I think, in a relationship, but she wasn't married. I know that we've talked about that was her heart's desire, to be married, to have children. She was 31. She was about to be 32. It's her birthday, actually, this weekend.
She was an avid hiker. Like it wasn't her first time. Something
Yeah,
I
she's
noticed.
very fit.
Yeah, something I noticed on her Instagram. Like she had hiker boots. She wasn't just wearing sneakers. Because for myself, I don't really hike all that much, and so I would just wear sneakers. So that just, for me, like this was something that very frequently was done.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like,
Why
was her life taken?
Yeah.
And these are the things I think that we can get hung up on. And so that's why we want to talk about this, is because grief is such an interesting experience and it's different for all of us, but truly there's ways to grieve that will help us move through and eventually accept things that are unpredictable, uncertain, confusing. And then there's ways we get stuck. But there's something, and we talked about Hannah, like, posted a lot online. She had a social media following. She had a YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. And in her last post, Hikes with Han, she said, there can always be something positive in every situation if you just look for it. God uses all things for good. Romans 8:28. And it's just interesting that that was her last thing that she said. What do you make of that?
I mean, the whole situation is just so... My mind has wandered about all the possible scenarios, why it happened, why now.
Yeah.
And then for that to be her last post, it's almost ironic.
Well, I look at it as God uses all things for good, which is what Romans 8:28 is. And so God decided that he was going to allow her life to be taken. We don't understand that. We don't maybe agree with it. And God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. He knows her beginning and her end. He knows everything about her life, and he still chose to take her. And if he uses all things for good, as Romans 8:28 says, to me, that's because he's going to use her death for his good. And I know I've seen people made a post about her. The New York Post made a post about her. Like, it's all over the Arizona news. It's gotten nationwide coverage. And in that coverage, they've talked about God. They've talked about scripture, which is powerful, right? And her message in her life was that giving your life to God isn't easy, but it's worth it. And so if that brings attention to that, and God knows, why he chose for that to happen, then, like, we can trust him in that. And I think that to me, that was the message, is that God's got this. He's using it for his good, and we can trust him even though we don't understand it or we may not like it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
It is crazy how much coverage her death has gotten, which I have mixed feelings about. It's like, that's wonderful. And also the fact that a lot of media outlets are covering, like, her last post and incorporating God into it. I think that's so beautiful, But then there's like that part of me of, it's sad that it's her death that's being showcased.
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily in a bad way, but there's a part of me that wishes that could have happened as she's still standing here. And that recognition and that push of God to other people.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how that does happen in the media, that people get, I don't know what the word is, exalted when their life has been taken or their life is cut short, when it's like the message that they had while they were living, was good. So, yeah, I understand your mixed feelings about that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so because we don't know what happened and because there's a lot of like uncertainty, we wanted to talk about grieving in this episode and kind of first dive into like what is unhealthy grieving? Because grief is the multifaceted, complex emotions that you have when you lose someone, whether you knew you were going to lose them or you didn't, right? And particularly when you don't know, it's all the emotions that come up and then like how you deal with that, because that is there is a skill to dealing with your emotions. It's called emotion regulation. And especially, with your relationship with the Lord, He can help you. He can help heal your heart through the process. But there's a lot of us who did not learn how to deal with our emotions. Number one, it wasn't modeled for us. And then especially intense emotions. If you're really close to someone that you lose, or you have to watch someone going through a cancer battle or whatever it is, like no one teaches us how to deal with these strong emotions that can come up. And so I want to talk first about like unhealthy grieving. And so we can just kind of recognize in ourselves, like, because I've even had, my own experiences with unhealthy grieving and kind of the consequences of that. But and healthy grieving is really when it's like extremes. So on one end of the extreme is something happens, we lose someone, and then we don't allow ourselves to experience the emotions. We basically like repress them,
Bottle it up.
We shut it down. We say, I'm fine.
And continue on with life.
Yeah. Like you just kind of like, well, that sucks. I'm going to keep it moving.
Until one day, usually there's a trigger, or just, you bottle it so much, you can't keep the cork on it anymore and it just explodes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because it's got to go somewhere. It's an energy. And so it's not like just because we have maybe strong defense mechanisms to tell ourselves that we're fine and it doesn't bother us, that doesn't actually mean that's true. And so that energy is living in your body. That's that whole body keeps the score, where that energy is in your body and it will affect your body. It can cause illness and disease. And it also can cause mental health issues like depression or anxiety if you're not able to recognize what you're experiencing, and like you were saying, it can go the other way. So if you're not aware of what you're experiencing or feeling, or you just don't want to deal with it, then it can be displaced onto somebody else. So have you ever had that experience where you got upset about something and you took it out on someone close to you?
Of course.
Yeah, right. And like it's not really about them. It's about what you're feeling about whatever it is, but then like you lash out at your husband or your mother or your kids or whatever. That's called displacement, right? Where we just like, we're not getting to the real root of the issue, which might be like, I'm scared, I'm sad, I'm whatever about this loss I just had. Mm-hmm. So there's real power in being present with like, what am I actually feeling?
What is actually the thoughts going through my head?
Yeah. Because it's crazy. We have all these sneaky ways of trying to avoid our feelings. Usually it comes in the form of addictions. But addictions are sneaky too, because you can have an addiction to watching TV. You can have an addiction to being on your phone, being on your computer, working too much. You can have an addiction to your looks and being obsessed about your looks. Like, it doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol and porn, which are the obvious ones, mm-hmm. right? You can turn to food and start emotionally eating.
I feel like that one's probably really high up there.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
I mean, we're trained as a society to food for reward, food for comfort. Yeah.
Well, think about like when you have something really hard happen. It's kind of like a lot of stuff goes out the window.
Well, I think that also it's a way of numbing.
Mm-hmm.
You're physically doing something so that the thoughts are not overtaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get to sidetrack and think about something that's completely, opposite than what's truly going on.
And the problem is that it works. So you can dive into work, or you can dive into your phone, or you can dive into this yummy meal or whatever it is. And you get all those feel good feelings, that distraction. You don't have to deal with the pain. And I think so many of us are taught to not deal with the pain because we grew up in families that didn't know how to deal with pain in a healthy way. It wasn't modeled. And so then generationally, it's just like, okay, when something negative comes up, I don't really want to focus on the negative. So I'm just going to keep doing whatever I'm doing.
I think also if you were told in your household that it's weak for you to cry, it's weak for you to feel sad or any type of emotion, so to just bottle up and keep on going. Like the world doesn't stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's clearly something learned, right? Like that. And it's also showing you that it's not safe. Mm-hmm. It's not safe to have those feelings. It's not safe to be vulnerable. No one's going to validate you in that or be there for you in that. So you might as well just seal it up. Mm-hmm. But then there's the situations where if it's so painful and it's just like, people will tend to go into like shock, and that shock is very protective. I felt that. I don't know if you felt shock with Hannah. I definitely felt some shock for a bit and was just in disbelief. I just was like, no, this can't be.
Yeah, I felt the same.
Mm-hmm. And so, and that's a part of grieving. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about the stages of grieving, and like disbelief is the first stage of just not believing it. And that is a protective, right? Because those emotions can become so intense. But then it's like, as you start to recognize, no, this really did happen, it's paying attention to yourself and become aware, like turn the lens in and say, okay, what am I noticing I'm doing? Am I reaching for the Oreos or the comfort food? And again, that's not bad, like initially, but if you keep doing it, right?
It becomes a habit.
Yeah. If you because you're trying to escape in something, in staying busy, in trying to comfort yourself in these ways, when really you might need to sit down and like fall apart. You just might need to do that. And that's okay. Because it's about being present with your emotions. So
I think it's also about, I don't know if I'm going to get a little too ahead, but releasing your emotions. I know for me, I don't think I was necessarily taught this, but crying, I went years without crying.
Really?
Yeah. And it just always felt weird to cry. I think I would always, because I was someone who tended to bottle things up growing up, and I would always have an explosive moment. And that would be like the big time that I would just like cry so hard, I can't breathe. And then I would say, honestly, in the past 3 years, I finally have become okay with crying. And I look at it as a sign as like purging and releasing what no longer needs to hold on to your body anymore.
Yeah. And it's like an honoring of what is. Like it's already in there. So it's you honoring it by acknowledging it and letting it express itself, which...
And it feels so good because now I cry all the time. I am like the biggest crier now. But I always feel so much better when I... cry, release, and am able to work through that emotion, release that emotion, and then move on.
But that tells me you now feel safe. So what's different? Like what changed from back then to now where you feel safe to let yourself do that?
I guess my husband, Hunter.
Yeah.
Because before meeting him, I lived alone. And I think that's where I like really started to get more in tune with it's okay to cry.
Yeah.
And so I got comfortable crying with myself. And then now I've cried enough times in front of Hunter where I'm like, well, here it comes. Sometimes I don't know why I cry.
But it sounds like he allows it and there's safety in it. Like he doesn't make you feel weak, bad,
weird.
And that's huge. because really our emotions just want to be felt. They just want to be known. Right. So it's like, that's huge, that because then they go, by the way, that's the whole thing is like emotions are like waves. They come and they go. If you try to, stuff them back and pretend they aren't there, they're going to do what you did, which you're going to have an explosion. And depending how long you've been stuffing depends on how big that explosion is. And that's not good for you or anyone around you. But if you can allow it, it goes away.
I think also another thing is just saying it out loud how you feel.
Yeah.
Because even now, I know we're heavily diving into grief, but this kind of goes along with it. Even if I get triggered or if something happens that makes me mad, if I just say out loud, like, that made me really mad, and I acknowledge it, I'm like, it just goes away.
Oh, yeah.
So, even with the situation of grief, if someone passes, sitting down with yourself and just being like, I'm hurt, I'm sad, I'm mad, I don't understand, I'm confused, I'm frustrated. It really, when you like put a label to it, it kind of helps it, like, okay, we've categorized it, we understand, we acknowledge.
And especially if you can acknowledge it, and then also if you have someone else who can acknowledge it. But then that brings us to the third part, which is bring these feelings, right? So we said you don't want to stuff them down. You want to observe if you do that. If you do that, you want to find a way to bring these feelings up, to allow them so they don't blow up and be displaced onto others. Bringing them to the Lord. If you don't feel safe to bring them to anyone else, bringing them to the Lord. Because there's scripture that talks about, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. That's Psalm 34:18. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Matthew 5:4. So the Lord is our helper, our comforter, and he wants us to bring our grief to him. He wants us to say, like, Father, I am so sad. I am so scared. I am this, I am that. He wants you to come to him like a friend, like a father, because he will exchange our sadness for his love, his warmth, his peace. It may not go away because you've now lost someone that you love, but it's like, bring him in to your pain and your suffering, because he cares and he is near to those who are hurting, mourning, and who are brokenhearted.
I think it also, when you do that, it creates a level of trust with God as well. It builds that.
How so?
Because you're trusting him with your emotions, and that trusting him that he will bring the peace. He will protect you. He will be right by your side as you get through this difficult challenge.
Oh, yeah. And it challenges this notion that some people have, which is like, I have to present myself as polished to God, which is like, no, not even close. Like, he knows and sees all of you. He knows you're not polished. Even if you try to present that outwardly to the world, he knows the truth of what's going on with you. So he can see the sadness in your heart, the anger, the grief. He's just waiting for you to bring it to him. And then through that, you're building that trust, like, oh, he does care about me. He does love me. He does want to be there for me in my pain. And that's a whole other way of dealing with grief that is powerful, So even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Psalm 23:4. The Lord asks us to trust him with all our heart and to not lean on our own understanding. Proverbs 3:5. And that's really about when we lose someone that we love, even if we don't understand it, can we trust that the Lord is still in it? Even when it doesn't go the way that we think it should, can we trust that he's still in it? And I know with my dad, when my dad died, I talked about this in my testimony. I literally saw him on the floor dead, and my body fully went into shock. And I remember at the time, like I was dealing with so many other things. There was a lot of trauma going on at that point, a lot of loss in my life. And I remember looking at my dad and I was just like, I just had this, like, I don't have any way of dealing with this right now. Like, I couldn't believe that life was serving this to me. And I was just like, I literally don't have capacity to deal with this. And yet here it was. And so I remember I went into shock and I took on like a strong mode and I just like tucked it back in the back of my mind because I was like, I don't have space for this. And it wasn't, I mean, that was 2016. And so it wasn't till probably like 2019 that I actually could deal with my dad's death.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember I had this like experience where it was like I just became this little girl who was hysterically bawling, like crying out for her dad. And it was just that it was like all the grief that I hadn't dealt with came up in that moment, because we are built to process and deal with and accept things like loss. But if you don't, for whatever reason, for me, it was like I was too overwhelmed and too overloaded. But if you don't, for whatever reason, it doesn't go away.
Well, I'm curious. So you waited 3 years for it to deal with it, to process it.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that made you decide, like, okay, it's now that I deal with this?
It was like a breakup that I had,
Oh, okay.
another one. And I was doing deep, like, father work with God and with like a therapist at the time. And I wasn't like intentionally trying not to grieve my dad. It was more an unconscious process to protect me, where I just literally was like, because I had a full-time career. Like I had to go take care of patients every day. I was like, I can't, I don't have space for this. So, yeah, it was just intentionally deciding like, I'm going to do a lot of deep work on my dad right now. And then it was like, it started coming up.
So I'm curious, what would you say to the person who is in a similar situation that just lost someone that is really close to them, that they do have a lot on their plate, that they do have a career, they have a family to take care of, whatever the situation may be? What would you recommend? Because as someone who, is in a similar spot, they might think the same thing. Like, I don't have time to deal with this right now.
Yeah. I would encourage you to not do what I did. So I was buried in my work and I prioritized that to keep me strong and afloat. And because it was about making money, right? It was about being self-sufficient. And so I would say what matters more is the thing is if you trust in God, you know he will provide for you. So what I should have done is take some time off. I should have taken off at least a week or two to just maybe fall apart and grieve and like get help, like talk to people, get some support, but I didn't do that. I just went back to work and I just kept pummeling along. And of course I would like cry and stuff, but I really just took this strong stance, which I think a lot of people try to take. It's like, oh, it means something about me if I fall apart or if I need to take time off. And it's like, no, that is like nurturing and caring for your soul and for your heart and for your mind. So I would say take time off if you need it. Like ask your partner to take the kids and you go and take the weekend and go out in nature, like go do something, connect with God, connect with family, go to a safe space so that you can just be free of responsibility. So you can just feel whatever it is that you need to feel. Because when we do that, then it kind of can like leave us and we start to accept and it moves us through the grieving process more versus we're just holding on to all of it and it's just getting stuck in our body. And by the way, I just want to add this because I didn't deal with my dad's death. I got into a relationship shortly thereafter that wasn't healthy for me, which caused me more problems. because I was trying to find that love. And because I was grieving and hurting, I didn't do it in a healthy way. And I think that's the unhealthy grieving part, is sometimes when we have grief, we will start some habits, whether it's the eating not great food or the staying up late or the getting addicted to your phone. We'll start like avoidance habits. For me, it was diving into another relationship that it was about escape. It was about drinking. It was about partying. It was just being with this guy, having sex, whatever it was. That was my escape of like, I don't want to deal with this. So I'm going to go try to feel pleasure and feel good. That can become habits that cause consequences, you know? So.
And take you down a path that's not meant for you.
Yeah. And just prolong. It's not like I didn't have to heal from my dad. I did. I just prolonged it.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, don't do that if you can avoid that, you know? Try to get some space in your life so you can heal and grieve.
Yeah, it sounds like the sooner / faster that you can do it, you're putting yourself in a better position than if you don't deal with it and try to push it off, prolong it as long as possible.
Yeah, because then that becomes a habit and a lifestyle. Like you put it off and then you convince yourself you're fine, but now you're losing sleep, you're gaining weight, your hormones are out of whack, your hair might be falling out, you're having thyroid issues. It's like we don't escape emotions that we've buried. We just don't. It will come out in some funky habit. It will mess with your sleep. It'll come out in your body. Like it literally, we don't escape it. So learning how to move through emotions is one of the most important things you can do in your life because they influence us so heavily. And I think incorporating your relationship with God, so important. So, you know, I wanted to talk about I want to kind of make it simple with grief. Is the reason people get stuck in grief and then it alters their life in a negative way, right? Like you've heard people say oh, they lost this person. They were never the same. And it's because you get stuck in a perspective, usually with grief. You get stuck in a perspective like, why did this happen? This was not fair. This was not right. This shouldn't have happened. Or you get stuck in an emotion, which perspectives create emotions, like you stay in anger or resentment or fear or depression, right? And so to get unstuck, you really have to take care of your mind, your heart, and your body. It's like a full experience, right? So with your mind, I would say it's really important that you monitor and be aware of what you're telling yourself. Like I know with Hannah, I was going straight into the why? This is not fair. Why? Like she's 31. She had her whole life ahead of her. Why would you take her, God? This doesn't make sense, right? And I was her friend. Had I been her best friend or her sister or her mother, that why would have amplified 100-fold. So it's like those perspectives, though, of course you're going to ask those questions, but if you stay there, if you can't come to a new perspective, you're going to get stuck. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think of it as, I think it's okay to wonder those things. I think it's fine to take time to wonder.
Yeah.
But just as you can't explain many things that go on in the world, if it's something that you can't come to an answer to, you've got to let it go.
Yeah.
And be okay with not knowing. I think that's where people really get held up, is they need to have this closure. They need to have this answer. Yeah. And there's going to be times where you don't have that, and that's okay.
Those are the mysteries of God, that there are things we can't fathom as limited human beings, and God sees all. So even though to us it's not fair, it doesn't make sense, we don't like it, to him, he has a plan.
Right.
Part of that, and I think this is where people who have faith, it astronomically helps us versus people who don't, is that we know Hannah's in heaven and that she is good. She is more than good. She's better than you and I right now because she's with the Father. And all the things that come with that, the peace, the bliss, there is no grief in heaven. There is no anger in heaven. So she's in a better place, and God's using her in the way he's going to use her up there. But if we don't have that knowing about Jesus and heaven, then you're just left with emptiness of the why, a why that you'll never be able to explain. When you trust in God, you say, God, I may not understand, but I trust you. Mm-hmm. And I can live with that. I can live with, I don't understand, but I trust God. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's really big. And I think also something I notice with grief is when people get stuck, they're focused on the loss. They're focused on how sick the person was. They're focused on whatever the issue was in their death. And it's like, what about their life? Celebrating their life, celebrating the goodness that they brought to your life, being able to reflect on that. I know this weekend. So this weekend is Hannah's birthday. She would have been 32. When this airs, that won't be true. But right now, she would have been 32, and her friends are all going to go out for like a 5 a.m. hike and go out to coffee because she loved coffee and reading the word and going on hikes. And probably they're going to go dancing and like go out to eat and just do things that she loved to do. I think that's so incredibly beautiful.
I think that's awesome. I think that's the way you should celebrate someone.
Yeah. Like all the things. So like thinking about, what did this person teach you? What did this person bring to your life? I know with me, Hannah showed me the power of vulnerability and how if you can get over yourself and be vulnerable in front of others. She did it online. I was always like, ooh, I couldn't do that. I say that, but now here God has us being vulnerable, by the way, and sharing stuff online. But so many people can connect to that because it's real.
And so many people don't know how to be vulnerable.
Oh, yeah. No. Or don't know how to be, just to be authentic, just to be like,
this is who I really am. Take it or leave it.
Yeah. This is
being
how I'm
bold.
feeling today. Yeah. So what did you learn from this person? What beauty did they bring to your life? What gifts did they bring to your life? Can you celebrate them when it's their birthday or when it's the anniversary of their death, instead of falling into a depression, which can happen for people? How can you celebrate their life? How can you celebrate the amount of time you had with them, however short that may have been? How can you honor them? And I think when you can start to shift it like that, it becomes a beautiful thing, because none of us are going to get out of this alive.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest thing, is taking a challenging time, a hard and intense time, and looking at the positive, mm-hmm. and creating positivity around it, because in the long run, that's going to help you than anything else.
Yeah. And we're not saying go immediately to the positive, right? We're saying feel your feelings.
Yeah. Process it. Mm-hmm. Feel it, let go of it, do what you got to do. Mm-hmm. But after, I would say like a week, couple days, start incorporating the positive habits, actions, thoughts.
Yeah. I will say it's always tricky to put timelines on things, because
well, I agree with
like
that.
If Hunter died, you wouldn't be like after a week, like, oh, it's like.
I guess I look at it as after 3 weeks of doing something, it's going to turn into a habit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so it's like sometimes when you lose someone, you're just surviving. Like you're literally like, depending on the loss, you are surviving for however long. And then it's like recognizing, okay, what can I start doing? What can I start giving to God? And like taking steps. It really depends, right? Because grief can be, I lost my cat, or it can be my child was killed. Like it's a big, and so you kind of have to, the timeline of it is tough, but more so when I think of timelines, I think of like what you were saying. If you've gotten to a point where you're not functioning, because things have gotten so unhealthy and you're not functioning, you absolutely know that grief is controlling you and you need support. You need to do something about it, right? And then there's a difference if you're functioning but you're feeling and you're moving through, and maybe you take some space so you can feel. But then it's like you get to decide, okay, now I really got to pay attention to, what am I telling myself? What story am I telling myself about this death? And is it hurting me, or is it bringing me more towards acceptance? Like you're talking about. And I think something that's really helpful with that, I think you should talk about Preston here, but is journaling, is writing down, like doing a dump, like a brain dump of everything that you're thinking so that you can get it out. And also prayer journaling, talking to God through your journal, like asking the questions to God, bringing it to him, but journaling it down. I know you did something like this.
Yes, I wrote a letter to my deceased cat. So I personally have never lost anyone super close to me. So I don't know what that's like. And, I guess with me putting a timeline on it, I don't have the experience such as yourself. Like I said, of losing someone so close. I really only had my cat that I had for 15 years, which sounds silly. But yes, I had learned that writing a letter to that person, to that animal, really helps you to look at the positives and honoring them, like what they taught you, special moments, the little things that you did with them. It helps release that, and it puts you in a better state of mind. Now that I have God in my life, I would like write the letter to God about them, telling him about them, even though he already knows. But all the cool things that we did.
To hear from you.
Yeah. And I think that it just, we have so much going on in the mind at all seconds. I know, especially for women, we don't know how to shut off our brains. So journaling is something that I just always do, and it helps me just release, and then also to visually see what's going on in my mind. Because then I'm able to put things together, release things easier. It really helps to get rid of the thoughts that are just like over consuming, that don't need to be there.
Oh yeah. It's a beautiful practice. It brings about a lot of self-awareness, so you know what to do.
Yes.
Right. So if you were writing, just give an example, if you're writing and you notice a lot of themes of anger, well, that just shows you that's where you're at in your grief process, because there's disbelief or denial is the first stage. And then there's like anger, and then there's a bargaining. And then there's sadness, deep sadness. For some, it's depression, and then acceptance. This is kind of an old model, a way of looking at grief, but you kind of cycle through these different stages. It's not linear. And so if you're writing and you're really angry, it's like, okay, good. You want to release that. You want to let God know about that. But you also don't want to let that anger control you. And this is the tough part, is like you said, it brings awareness, but then it's about, okay, what do I do with this anger? One thing I would say, particularly with anger, is to move your body, because there's a lot of energy with anger. And that's another piece of grief, is like, you want to move your body. It's really tempting when you're in survival mode or you have intense grief to like hole up and isolate. Really tempting. You don't want to do it. If you do it for a short period of time because you're just like leveled, okay. But then you got to get out. You got to get outside. You got to go for a walk. You got to get sun on your face. You got to buddy up with someone, and they got to get you out of the house. Maybe go meet someone for coffee. These things are important, because the more we isolate and withdraw, the darker things get for people.
I feel like it just I look at it as like it just sticks to you.
Yeah. It festers.
Yeah. Whereas if you move, you're letting it move to then release out of the body.
Yes. So like, I know for me, years ago when I had a breakup, I was so angry. There was so much anger. So I would go to the gym and I was like lifting weights, and I would put on music, and I was just like, meh. And for me, it helped because I felt stronger. I was moving my body. I was releasing some of the anger. And I was also telling God, like I was writing to God. I was telling God, like, You are my avenger, Lord. Like, he tells us not to seek justice, but that he will seek justice on our behalf. And so I was really trusting in that at that time because I had so much anger. So, taking care of yourself while going to the Lord, moving through these emotions, prioritizing it, really important. Really, really important. And just remembering like that a grief is, I call them like grief is a lot like there's these, I call them sneaker waves. So like your emotions are like a wave. So with an emotion, something triggers it, it increases the intensity, it peaks, and then you calm down, right? So it's like a wave. And if the emotion gets triggered and it starts to increase and you cut it off and you shut it down, then you're just shoving all that emotion into your body. What you want to do is you want to let yourself feel it, feel it, feel it in a healthy way. It peaks, you cry, you yell, you scream into a pillow, you write, whatever you got to do, you lift weights, and then it calms down, right? Well, with grief, there's what's called sneaker waves. Well, I call it sneaker waves, where you can be fine. You can be sitting at your desk and then it's like, it just comes over you. And suddenly your eyes are watering and you're just crying. Or you have like a memory. Or you smell a cup of coffee and it makes you miss that person because you had coffee with them every morning. Whatever it is. That's okay. That's a part of grief. And some days with grief, you're going to be mad as hell. And some days you're going to be so sad you don't think you can get out of bed. And other days you're going to feel fine. And you're going to be like, this is so weird. But it's about just allowing and not judging yourself and having grace for yourself because God has grace for you in that. And letting that happen and bringing it to God, bringing it to God, bringing it to your partner or to your family or to your friends and getting support in that. It's a process. And I will just say, that if, I know for me, when I had some, I've talked about it before, between 2014 and 2016, I had like loss after loss after loss after loss. So much so that it brought up like all my childhood stuff. It was just like I was way triggered. And so I had to go get help. I had to go into EMDR therapy. I had to dive deep with the Lord. And the cool thing is the Lord, you dive deep with him, you get into scripture, he'll renew your mind, he can deliver you. So God is our healer. And you just got to talk to God about like, Lord, I need support, and just listen for what he has for you. He might have you work with someone. He might have you just work with him, So it's really about doing it with the Lord, bringing your pain to the Lord and seeing what he has to say about your journey for healing. So that's pretty much what I have. I wanted just to conclude with Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And that's just really about like, we can be so heavy, we can carry so much overwhelm, we can have burden, but God's yoke is light, right? His burden is light. So he will exchange, if you come to him with your heaviness, he will minister to you, he will speak to you, and just trust him that he sees everything you're going through and he's got you. And he can give you peace beyond all understanding, even in the midst of a storm, because he loves you. And he's never left your side. Well, thank you guys for joining us. There's a lot, like this topic, grief is a complex topic, and there's a lot that we could honestly discuss, but we really wanted to honor Hannah because we just recently lost her and we love her, and we just want to send love to her family, to her friends, to anyone who is going through it, who is hurting, confused, has heavy hearts. We just pray that God will use this to bring people closer to him, that they will seek his face, seek him with all his heart, and you will find him. And I promise you that's true. I've done that in my own life where I've fallen on my face and said, Lord, help me. And he has. He has come to me. He has revealed himself to me. And then once you have that, you realize you can trust him. So even in things that we can't understand or explain, he is with us. He cries with us. He feels our burdens with us. And you're never alone. You're never going through it alone. So, okay.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
We love you, Hannah.
We love you, Hannah.
Well, thank you for listening / watching this episode. We pray that you took something from this episode on whatever it may be, and that, if you're going through grief, if you've experienced grief, that, again, you've been able to take something and help with your process. We also our inboxes are always open. So if you want to express anything with us, we have created a very safe space for people to reach out. But until next episode.
Yeah, and I will say also, I work with folks a lot on grief. So I think my information is down below if you want to message me or just check out anything. If you feel like you might need support during this time, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. So until next episode, remember that your past does not define you.
But your redemption refines you.
Love you, gals.